Okay, I think we'll make a start if that's okay. So welcome everybody and good afternoon. I'm Mike Hanna. It's my privilege to be the director of the Institute of Neurology. I'm really pleased to welcome you all to this year's annual address. I'm particularly pleased to welcome Dr. Michael Spence, President and Provost, who will give the annual address this year, which is great. Also, I'd like to welcome colleagues, Professor David Lomas, Vice Provost Health, Professor Anthony Smith, Vice Provost Faculties, and Professor Alan Thompson, Dean of the Faculty and Pro-Provost for London. I'm just going to say a few words about what's been happening at the Institute over the last 12 months, and then I'll be very pleased to introduce Dr. Michael Spence. Of course, the last 12 months has been pretty dominated by the pandemic, and many colleagues across the Institute and UCL have really stepped up to address the challenge. At Queen Square, here's some sort of examples of things that have been happening. We've now got 25 PIs involved directly in research on COVID-19. We've published about 132 research publications on different aspects. And of course, our education team has switched initially to online and then back to a hybrid model, and have done a great job supporting our students. And there are many other activities reaching out across the university and externally, nationally and internationally. And importantly, many of our colleagues have contributed to volunteering in the hospital and in vaccination centres, which is really great. You may remember last year I showed you this publication, which was really the first detailed analysis of the phenotype of disease of the nervous system caused by COVID-19. And this got huge worldwide media attention and remains a seminal paper in this area. But we've continued this. So this year we've also, from the stroke group, published an important paper in the Lancet, understanding in more detail the relationship between vaccination for COVID and the risk of cerebral venous thrombosis, from Richard Perry and Dave Waring and their group. And the other thing that's happened is colleagues who translate their research into clinical practice have had to change the way they do that. And there's been a nice example of innovation from the team led by Alex Leff and Nick Ward, where they've adapted their neurorehabilitation program to be an online system, and have now done over 2,000 online sessions with patients. And this is in partnership with colleagues in the hospital and with the same new charity, which is great, and that's now published in JNNP. I want to particularly thank all of the teams who've really worked hard over this past year, supporting each other and supporting students and colleagues. So particularly Helene, the Institute manager, the three existing deputies, Jippy, Linda and Helene, and I particularly want to thank Linda because she's stepping down as deputy after many years of excellent work. I also want to highlight the huge work done by professional services colleagues, both the central ION team and the departmental managers and administrators. It's been a very tough time and everybody's really pulled together well, and I deeply appreciate that. Shown with the red edging, I particularly want to thank Sandra and Navida for all of their work, and particularly for help in preparing this event. And I want to welcome 4 new deputy directors appointed through open competition and interview to increase our bandwidth and contribute hopefully to the evolving UCL strategy. So Alex Leff for education and student experience, Selena Ray for partnerships and communication, Sanjay Sisodia for climate change and sustainability, and Dimitri Kuhlman for enterprise and translation and innovation. So welcome to them. I also want to thank the huge support we get from the faculty team. They're obviously preparing for Christmas already, but I want to thank Alan and all the team for all of the support they give us. And it's been great to work across the faculty with colleagues across the different divisions and the institutes indicated here. So despite the pandemic, it's been a productive year in terms of our publication output, and actually it's increased with over 1,900 peer-reviewed papers, which is a really impressive effort by all colleagues. And we have some of the most highly cited colleagues in neuroscience and behavior in the world. We now have £335 million in active research grants, and our contribution has steadily increased over recent years, as indicated here. You won't be able to read this list, but this is just to give you an indication of awards over 500,000 that have been activated in the last 12 months. So there's 14 over 1 million and 12 over 500,000, which is a major testament to all colleagues at the Institute, including many from MRC and Wellcome. I also want to just mention that despite the pandemic, there was huge amounts of work done to get the REF submission in. There were 139 returns from the Institute, and I particularly want to thank Claire Westwood, who did a massive amount of work, and of course David Shanks, who led the submission. So despite the pandemic, we have been working to develop our science strategy, and we held a virtual online away day in October. And we managed to get 121 of our 130 PIs to discuss what we felt together were important science strategic developments for the next 5 years. And we also thought together about how we can ensure we remain as one cohesive community across the distributed estates, and particularly the dual hub when Gray's Inn Road is being developed. In the process leading up to this day, we got each of the heads of departments to convene a meeting of their own 8 departments, and as part of that, they all submitted, each department submitted a 1,000-word document with their thoughts and ideas about the future of science at the Institute. And we did a sort of little exercise which is imperfect, but from these 8,000 words that they generated, we looked at what the most common 50 were. And this wasn't a big surprise, but it just re-emphasized our work in the areas of discovery, translational research, clinical trials, biomarkers, and genetic therapy. And what was really clear from the whole day was how all of our departments are actively engaged in bidirectional translational research. And what was stressed time and time again, and I think this is a sort of USP of the Institute, is the fundamental importance of connecting discovery science with deep expertise about patients and their diseases, ultimately to improve patients' lives and benefit society. So from that day, the initial thoughts are that when we think about the way we want to work with the new dual hub model, is that we want to be a flexible, integrated translational ecosystem, one community combining excellence in clinical research and pathomechanistic discoveries, an environment which supports and inspires all our staff, and particularly our students. And we want to work together to identify sensitive, predictive biomarkers of disease and develop therapies to help patients is our ultimate goal. And we'll be developing our strategic document. We've got a further away day in December, and we hope that will feed in usefully to the whole UCL discussion that's going on to develop a strategy. And across the faculty, working with Alan, we're also looking to see how we can really develop a seamless translational neuroscience connected bidirectional pipeline. So ultimately understanding how the nervous system works and developing diagnostics and therapies. And this will require going right from basic neuroscience through to hopefully our NHS partners. It will include a large community of colleagues with students, early career researchers, all the different partners, patients, philanthropy, and we're really excited to develop this plan. And I think UCL is extremely well placed in neuroscience to do this. One of the key parts of our translational strategy is the Wolfson Experimental Neurology Centre, set up a few years ago, And there's an incredible facility for us to be able to take science to patients and do trials and experimental medicine studies. This has been really successful, led by Vincenzo Libri, and has actually in the last year contributed also to the vaccine effort. What's really noticeable is in the last few years how genetic therapy developments are advancing. So the antisense oligonucleotide studies for a range of different neurological diseases are now active in the centre, and more are being developed. The centre is now overloaded, and we're looking to expand, hopefully by mid-2022, into the ground floor of Queen Square House. Linked to that, the strength at the Institute and across the university actually in gene discovery is formidable. As you know, Henry Holden leads major genetic discovery programs across many departments at the Institute. And what's really exciting is the genetic therapy techniques now are advancing to really start to make gene therapy in patients a reality, and indeed some treatments are already licensed on the NHS. At the Institute, there are very active preclinical programs, for example, in refractory epilepsy, in forms of motor neuron disease and spasticity. So these are preclinical developments, but the epilepsy program is going into patients in the next year, hopefully. And of course, we have the Wolfson facility where we can deliver these therapies. And indeed, some have already been delivered in partnership with industry, for example, in Huntington's with Sarah Tabrizi, and Nick Fox leads a Sigrid Rousing neurogenetic therapy program. So I think this is a huge opportunity for the future for the Institute and faculty at university. And this, of course, also depends on external partnerships. And here are some examples of enterprise successes in recent years. There are many more that I haven't put on this slide. You get the idea of how well this is going, and we think it can go even better. And at the bottom, there's some examples of spin-out companies that have been developed or are being developed at Queen Square. To enhance this further, Dimitri's been appointed as the Deputy Director for Translation, Innovation and Advanced Therapeutics, and he will set up a translational advisory group and also be active in facilitating the development of a genetic therapy accelerator at the Institute and link with the TRO and the other excellent capabilities that are present at in central UCL. So many partners are needed to develop translational research, and I just want to thank all of these colleagues. So the hospital and trust partners, the 2 BRC themes that are being developed at Queen Square, the leadership of those themes in dementia and in translational neuroscience, of course the faculty and life and medical sciences, UCL partners, the domain, and colleagues at the CRIC and Sainsbury Wellcome are all partners in our translational endeavour. And I want to particularly welcome the new Chief Executive, David Provost, who started in September. We also work closely with many charities, and through the OVPA office, we form many partnerships, and I want to thank all of the team in OVPA. I also want to thank the Brain Research UK and the National Brain Appeal, as well as many partners listed here that help us with raising funds. So I'm going to attempt in the next few minutes to identify a few highlights that have happened in terms of research over the last 12 months. I want to thank all the heads for sending me all of the different highlights, and I've tried to distill them, and I apologize, I can't mention everything, but I've tried to do a few. We have 8 departments headed by 5 women and 4 men who've all worked extremely hard over this last 12 months. They're all listed here, and they're all generally disease-based departments, but they span discovery through translation to clinical research, as you know. So one of the departments which was newly formed after the reorganization a few years ago was Clinical and Movement Neuroscience, and this has been particularly successful in terms of research outputs and grant income in recent years, and some of these are illustrated here. They focus on Parkinson's, ataxia, and also mitochondrial diseases. Kathy Price heads up the Department of Imaging Neuroscience, and Kathy recently secured another £3 million extension for the Wellcome Centre for Human Imaging. which incorporates the Max Planck Center. And here's two examples of recent interesting findings from the Max Planck Center group. I think this is two PhD students. The first on the left in science is a demonstration that the brain learns from experienced and imagined events through a process of neural replay. And in the second paper on the right in Cell, there's some evidence when this is studied in patients with schizophrenia that this may be a reduced replay or a disruption of this process, raising an interesting new possible mechanistic understanding of schizophrenia. Another nice piece of work from the Wellcome Center is illustrated here, looking at improving epilepsy surgery outcomes with an automated algorithm for detecting MRI abnormalities in epilepsy. The neuromuscular disease department spans discovery through to clinical research and focuses on ALS, neuromuscular diseases, and genetics. There's a lot of work going on in RNA biology, and this paper in Cell focuses on how TDP-43 condensation influences its RNA binding specificity and therefore may influence gene expression, which is relevant to a range of, potentially relevant to a range of neurodegenerative diseases. Biomarkers is a really important area across departments. Here's an example of a translational science biomarker in motor neuron disease, where a microRNA 181, when combined with neurofilament light chain, is a more specific predictor of progression in ALS. In neurodegeneration department, which is headed by Nick Fox and Sarah Tabrizi, there's also been a lot of really interesting discoveries. Here's one example from Dervis in John Hardy's group, identifying a genetic link between the risk of Alzheimer's disease and severe COVID-19 outcomes mediated through a gene called OAS1. And this actually got some attention from the Telegraph. The two other large parts of the department include the Dementia Research Center, which is very active across discovery enterprise, as you can see here, with involvement, for example, in gene therapy trials. And Sebastian Crutch in that department contributed recently to advising filmmakers in the making of films on dementia, illustrated at the bottom, the film called Supernova. Sarah Tabrizi leads the Huntington's Disease Research Center, which is highly productive. For example, this paper in the Lancet Neurology, looking at the biological and clinical characteristics of gene carriers far from their predicted onset age. And there's a whole raft of clinical trials and gene therapy trials being developed that are led by Sarah. Dave Waring heads up brain repair with a focus particularly on stroke and imaging, but there are also active groups in autonomic neurology and in spinal repair indicated here. Dave recently published a large study on 20,000 stroke patients looking at risk scores for prediction of intracranial hemorrhage. We also, of course, are very pleased to have the DRI at UCL as one of our departments at the Institute, and this is led by Karen Duff. This is, of course, part of a network across the country, the UK DRI, which is led by Bart Disruper and Adrian Ivinson. And colleagues building the program at UCL are doing excellent basic science research, some of which is indicated here. And the PI group is expanding rapidly, which is really, really great. In epilepsy, we have a very strong grouping led by Leigh Sander as the head of department. And again, they have made really interesting both preclinical as well as clinical discoveries really in the last 12 months. So here's one example of a system level analysis of microglial activation as a modifying factor in common epilepsies. SUDEP is, of course, a big issue in epilepsy, sudden death in epilepsy, and they've developed a personalized prediction tool for risk stratification in that disorder, published in Neurology. And they're very active in enterprise. So John Duncan has developed an EpiNav software platform for epilepsy surgery programs. And Dimitri Kuhlmann has led a spin-out company for epilepsy gene therapies, one example of which we hope is going into patients in the next year or so. And the Department of Neuroinflammation is led by Olga Ciccarelli, and they do discovery science right through to clinical trials. Here's an example of a possible intervention that may reduce demyelination in a rodent model. A major success was Jeremy Chataway securing 12 million for a multi-arm, multi-stage trial in progressive MS indicated here. So these are all great highlights from across the departments. In the last couple of minutes, I'll just tell you about some other institute activities. So we have appointed Sanjay Sisodia to lead on a very specific action-based program at the Institute on climate change, but also reaching out across the faculty and potentially the university. That will have three strands to it. There's research going on into understanding mechanisms of adaptation, a whole range of actions linking with the Climate Action Unit at UCL, as well as awareness locally. And Sanjay is planning a COP type event for the Institute in the next month. And we've been very active in sustainability programs, both in terms of the Green Impact Office Awards, as well as the Lab Awards, the LEAF Awards. And I want to thank Stephanie for all her work in relation to that. We're very committed to progressing our EDI mission, harnessing the power of diversity. We have a great leadership team, including Helene Plume-Favreau as Deputy Director for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, supported by a fantastic project manager, Hanna. And they've really pushed things forward rapidly in the last 12 months. I want to thank Nick Wood and Lizzie Fisher, who led the bid for the successful Silver Award. They did a really great job. I think they're planning to stand down the next few months, and we're pleased to welcome new leads for Athena Swan, indicated here, as well as new reps onto the for the EDI committee, indicated here. I want to thank Joe Barnes for fantastic work in recent years as leading on mentoring. We have a strong mentoring and career development support system at the ION, and to welcome the new leads for that area, and as well as congratulating Chris Hardy, who received an ION Excellence Award for mentoring. Senior promotions was very successful. Congratulations to the colleagues all listed here. There's also success in early career research promotion, which is really important. So again, congratulations to all of the colleagues indicated here. There were just too many awards to announce, and so I've just selected a few. Congratulations to all of these colleagues who've secured very significant awards, both young colleagues and colleagues who are young at heart. So that's really great. We're very sad to see the death of our colleague Louis Lim, who was a great colleague in the Department of Neurochemistry. So a little bit about the building as I come to the end. So things are progressing very well with the Grayson Road building, thanks to huge amounts of work from really a large number of people. This is some photos from just this month. They're about to commence what's called the Big Dig, where they're going to dig down about 3 stories. A huge amount of earth will be removed. They'll bottom out in February 2022, and then top out when the superstructure is built at will be February 2023. So it's all moving forward. We had the breaking ground ceremony in May, led by the Provost, which was great. And these are just some artist impressions of how we hope it's going to look. It is, of course, a partnership between UCLH, the Institute of Neurology, and also the DRI national headquarters will be in the building. So it's a partnership endeavor. One of the key features will, of course, be these new core facilities to serve the entire community and across potentially UCL and the faculty. These are sort of indicated here. And we envisage these will connect patients and patient samples with the research, or connect scientists with technology, and scientists with scientists. So we're excited about developing these core facilities. And of course, there'll be this dual hub where the clinical research will continue at Queen Square, and the experimental medicine and the trials will be at Queen Square, and the more preclinical science will be at Gray's Inn Road. But we very much want this to be one integrated community. Finally, on education, which of course is a really key part of what we do at the Institute. As I mentioned earlier, Alex Leff has been appointed as Deputy Director for Education and Student Experience. And I want to thank all the colleagues who've really made a huge contribution to our teaching effort, particularly David Blundred and Steve Kennelly, with great support from the faculty, Julie Evans and David Shanks. Our student numbers have increased over the last 10 years, as indicated here. We've got more PGT scholarships, and we're delighted to welcome new international students indicated here. Also, the recent awards to the master's students are a variety of awards, and congratulations. These are the colleagues that achieved the highest marks in their MSCs, which is great. We're also very pleased to hear just yesterday that the 2021 PRES results for the Institute have continued to improve significantly, indicated in the lower panel. And this was consistent with a survey that we've done internally for our PhD students, which again showed good results in terms of quality of supervision. I want to particularly thank Tracy Skinner and Des Bates for massive amounts of work to help and support our PhD students. And I want to announce that there was a competition, and Jipiskiova won as the best supervisor at ION for 2021. I don't think he knows this, so congratulations to Jippy for that achievement. Here are some of the comments that students made about Jippy's fantastic supervision, so well done, Jippy. We've launched Pat Harris 4-year PhD fellowship program this year, and we've launched and appointed 6 new PhD fellows, clinical neurology and neurosurgery PhD fellows, as a collaboration with the Cleveland Clinic. About 81 students graduated this year. Helene Plume-Favreau did a great job announcing all the students. And as you can see, Alan was very pleased, and it was a great event online. Hopefully it won't be too long before we are back face to face. And finally, there were some senior promotions at teaching level. So congratulations to these colleagues who all have done extremely well. And thanks to the whole teaching team. So that's me. That's the sort of summary of the year. I'm really, really pleased now to welcome Michael to give the annual address, which is entitled Universities and a Health System for the Future. So I'll stop sharing my screen because I think Michael is going to talk straight to camera. Thank you.
Terrific. Well, look, thanks, Mike. It's an incredibly great privilege to be here with you and to give this lecture. And I have, since arriving in London, been even more blown away by the quality of the work of the Institute than I was from afar. Your reputation is truly global, and you can see why from that summary that you've given. But the energy and creativity of the Institute are things that I've been profoundly impressed by from up close. I do have to say, though, that my task this evening is a little daunting. And it's not only because I'm giving the annual lecture in neurology and know sod all about the subject. It's also that my last encounter with the Institute left me a little disturbed. I was engaging with staff at a strategy away day and alluded, I thought in jest, to the prospect that my current mild nominal aphasia, associated, I have to say, mostly with the fact that I have 8 children whose correct names never seem to fall off my tongue, might turn into full-blown dementia. When Nick Fox looked concerned and offered treatment, I was reminded that I'm not far off my 60th birthday and that the conditions of the elderly loom large. That's a problem for me, but it is equally a problem for the health system and for the UK more generally, that old age beckons my entire generation. Indeed, by 2050, 1 in 4 people in this country will be over 65 and enjoying the delights of the chronic comorbidities of later life. The pandemic may have brought the problems of care for the elderly to public attention, but the health and social care systems have long been under the strain of our changing demographics. Of course, an aging population is not the only thing that's putting our health system under strain. Just as we must face into the challenges of caring well for a shifting demographic, we must also face into dealing with growing health inequalities in our countries, inequalities largely caused by the social determinants of health. Michael Marmot's 2020 Health Inequality in England, the Marmot Review 10 years on, makes for distressing reading. It's shocking that there are populations in our country for whom life expectancy has decreased in the last decade. Once again, the pandemic's provided ample evidence of a problem of which those at the healthcare coalface were already too painfully aware. Alongside an aging population and growing health inequalities are a whole host of factors that make modern care more expensive, not least our growing reliance on impressive but costly technologies and the rising costs associated with healthcare regulation and administration. Care's become more expensive, outstripping the growth in government health spending. Putting to one side the impact of the pandemic, we've long had an expectation that the healthcare system should do more with less, while it faces some of the most significant shifts in demand that it's seen in a very long time. There's no doubt that the system's been under extraordinary pressure in the last 18 months and survived through the grit and determination of an army of dedicated professionals. And our community stands in awe of the way in which the NHS has seen us through the pandemic. But it's important not to forget in all the clapping that pressure has been mounting on the system for many years now. And the question must be asked, how fit for the future it remains? How, if at all, must the healthcare system change if it's to face the many-sided challenges with which it's currently confronted? And what will the healthcare system of the future look like? Well, it was brave of you to ask an intellectual property lawyer to give the Institute of Neurology annual lecture, but you'll be relieved to know that having posed these difficult questions, I'm not foolhardy enough to proffer any answers. I could hazard the layman's guess that a system equitably delivering care to an aging population efficiently is likely to be less doctor-centric and less hospital-centric than that which we currently know. But the precise shape it might take is way beyond my ken. What I can do at the beginning of my time as Provost at UCL is to give you and the NHS trusts with whom we work a clear commitment. And that I think will be more useful than any prognosis I might offer the current system. I'll make my commitment and then, perhaps oddly, suggest some ways in which it will be difficult to keep and on which we'll need to work carefully with our healthcare partners. There are so very many issues that the healthcare system will need to think through as it adapts to its changing context. These include systems for funding, the balance of public spend on the maintenance of wellness and on dealing with illness, systems, modalities and locations for the delivery of care, the balance of guaranteed quality standard delivery and innovation, the structure of the healthcare professions and their respective roles and responsibilities in different care settings, the identification of the need for and development of new technologies for care, and the ubiquitous need better to manage health data, especially in a coherent system such as the NHS, in which the possibilities created by better integrated data systems are enormous. Each of these issues, and many more besides, requires a thoroughly multidisciplinary approach to its resolution. They're the kinds of questions for which the skills and training of healthcare professionals is insufficient and sometimes even unnecessary preparation. For that reason, there needs to be active engagement between the system, both at the level of the individual trust and at the level of government, not only with the traditional health faculties in our universities, but with the universities as a whole. We need to find better and better ways of harvesting the intellectual resources of the entire university community to engage with our health partners. More than half the research of UCL is in fields of health and medicine narrowly conceived. But if you included all the work that we do that has potential health application, the resources that we can bring in engaging with our partners are simply phenomenal. At UCL, there are at least 3 different ways in which we're trying to engage with the issues of health in this comprehensive way. First, in the new School for the Health of the Public, we want holistically to address issues in the maintenance of good health and the prevention of illness, building upon the call to action in the Academy of Medical Sciences report, Improving the Health of the Public by 2040. That's more than public health research as traditionally conceived. It's a call to all the disciplines in the university to think about ways in which their work can together contribute to supporting a healthier society, from law and regulation to food production and the built environment. It's putting questions of health impact at the center of many conversations in which they may traditionally only have had a peripheral place. Second, in many areas at UCL, we're increasingly developing strongly multidisciplinary approaches to the treatment of and support for people living with disease. I'd argue that this is particularly important in areas such as many of the neurological conditions in which biomedical solutions to the challenge of disease are often in their infancy. While our understanding of many of the diseases of the brain and therapeutic interventions are undoubtedly improving, these remain conditions in which the fundamental challenge is often how to assist people to live well with conditions that are as yet irreversible. For many of those people, engineers, architects, designers, and social scientists must be just as important in helping them to extend their quality-adjusted life years as their surgeon, pharmacist, or physician. It's essential that the kind of work that's done at the Institute of Neurology is reaching out across the Faculty of Brain Sciences and beyond into the wider university to find partnerships for better clinical care. I'm keen that in the strategic plan that we're currently developing, we should have at least one strong disease focus in which we consciously invest to bring together work from across the university for impact, where impact is understood as improved outcomes for people suffering from the condition. In a sense, I'm not that fussed what the disease focus might be, but I want to demonstrate that with a concerted effort to bring people together, we can have an extraordinary impact on an area of clinical care. Third, I'm very excited by the work that we're beginning to do in health systems and health management research. There are 2 lines of work here. One line of work involves supporting the effective management of existing healthcare systems by better training healthcare managers in effective business skills. Given that the health sector is one of the fastest growing in many economies, this must be a priority. I'm very proud, therefore, that UCL is now home to the world's first global business school for health. It has as its remit the training of effective leaders for the healthcare systems of the future. There's a question of effectiveness here, but there's also a question of public trust. A recent OECD study found that 1/3 of OECD citizens believe the health sector to be corrupt or very corrupt. If the health system is to be trusted to deal with issues as complex as those of aging and inequality, it must be demonstrably well run and marked by a transparent accountability. At another level, in the work of people such as Professor Naomi Fallup, UCL is making a real contribution not only to the effective management of existing systems, but also to the emerging field of health systems research. Our partner trusts, too, are engaging much more deliberately in the process of systems improvement than was once the case. But health systems research is still really only emerging, and universities arguably have a role in asking much more radical and fundamental questions about the delivery of care into the future than falls naturally within the systems improvement activity of a working healthcare trust. To give you an idea of the current situation, only around 5.6% of UK health research is committed to research into health services. But improving the resilience and cost and clinical effectiveness of our systems of healthcare delivery must be a priority for both clinicians and governments. This is an area of research that sits in an inherently cross-disciplinary space, and to grow needs support from universities and from policymakers. So a university such as UCL, one that's both the most comprehensive in the UK, but with a global strength in health and medicine, must have a particular responsibility and opportunity to work with our health partners to improve services for the future. And it's my commitment that we will bring the whole university to that task. And that might seem enough. We can all go now and have dinner. The new provost understands what a weight of responsibility a university such as UCL has in working with the health system, understands that that requires the intellectual resources of the whole institution, and commits to seeing that it honours that obligation. That sounds good, and it might even be reassuring to those who fear that appointing a lawyer to the role could be bad for the doctors. But it is, of course, not quite so simple as that. First, genuinely multidisciplinary work remains very difficult to do, and difficult to support even in universities such as UCL that are strongly committed to it. Second, bringing university and health system partners together in new areas of activity, even when they've worked together in education and clinical research for very long periods of time, can be rather less straightforward than it sounds. Let me unpack those claims a little, because I think honesty about the difficulties is a precondition to success. Multidisciplinary work, based as it is around problems or themes, lacks the natural coherence of work in the disciplines that has a unifying language of shared methodologies or professional practice. It's almost inevitable that the impetus of so much university work is towards the disciplinary or the professional, that the incentives built into our career structures and that the logic of our organizational design favors the disciplinary or professional over the problem-based or thematic. In order to facilitate effective multidisciplinary work, a university needs to pay attention to at least 4 things, none of which is straightforward. First, any multidisciplinary work needs charismatic and engaging leadership, sufficiently comfortable in the language of several disciplines to be able to excite colleagues about the potential benefits of working together. Because universities operate relationally and not through hierarchies of authority, leadership that can engage people to take the inevitable career risks of moving outside their discipline or professional community for however short a period is absolutely crucial. Without it, in my experience, a multidisciplinary project is almost certainly doomed to fail. Second, attention needs to be paid to the structure of multidisciplinary projects. There are 2 dangers. Sometimes insufficient attention is paid to whether the participants in a project actually have enough common language to be able to begin to work effectively together. It's no good putting a philosopher and a physiologist in a room and simply telling them to think great thoughts. Projects have to be structured so that people are always working with others just a little, but not too far outside their natural space, but in a way that permits ideas to be developed useful to the solution of a well-parsed problem. At other times, insufficient attention is paid to whether all the participants in a multidisciplinary project have something to gain from as well as to give to it. The social sciences scientists often complain that natural scientists tend to want them to participate in multidisciplinary projects merely as a kind of marketing department. The natural scientists will identify a problem and its solution, and it's up to the social sciences to ensure that the rest of humanity complies with what the natural scientists think best. But there cannot be mere service disciplines in well-structured multidisciplinary work. Everyone needs to be working on an issue that's genuinely challenging from the perspective of their discipline and that contributes to both the identification of and the solution to the problem under examination. Third, resources need to be allocated to multidisciplinary work in a way that does not set up unhelpful competition or division between disciplinary and multidisciplinary communities. This applies to labour, space, and money. In order to keep their methodological or professional tools sharp, those participating in multidisciplinary work must have accountabilities to a disciplinary or professional community. I remember a friend once saying that she moved back into a law faculty from an outstanding multidisciplinary unit because she said she was sick of being able to tell her colleagues anything about the law, whether well-founded or not, and having them believe her. Structures for career progression must also be able to recognise both disciplinary and multidisciplinary activity. Similarly, financial resource flows in a university must commit sufficient funds to multidisciplinary projects and units to be able to give them the ability to operate with a relative degree of autonomy, but must also create incentives for the disciplinary communities to participate and not to prevent either staff or students from taking part in a multidisciplinary project. A correlative question concerns the scale of any given multidisciplinary initiative and whether it ought to be located within or alongside existing departmental and faculty structures. This is something with which universities are constantly experimenting and in which the balance is extremely difficult to get right. Finally, sufficient physical space needs to be allocated to multidisciplinary work so that the collaboration facilitating effects of co-location can be brought into play without setting up unhelpful competition with the disciplinary and professional departments. And third, attention needs to be paid, if a university is to operate effectively in the multidisciplinary space, to the duration and number of multidisciplinary areas of focus within a given institution. The multidisciplinary space should be inherently dynamic and enable the university to respond to new problems as they emerge and as others become less pressing. But in tension with this necessary dynamism is the fact that it takes time for multidisciplinary communities to develop and to build the kind of relational capital that makes effective multidisciplinary working possible. So at the one extreme, some universities have experimented with multidisciplinary hotels, centres into which groups of researchers, though rarely teachers, move for fixed periods of time to work on particular problems, with the idea that they all move back to their home departments once the individual project on which they're working has finished. This model favours dynamism over the development of institutional expertise around a particular issue or set of issues. At the other extreme, some universities create, often with glamorous physical facilities, permanent homes for work in particular thematic areas, effectively creating new faculties or departments with a multidisciplinary focus. How time-limited these different structures become also affects the issue of how many areas of thematic work a university can support at once, assuming that there's not an endless number of challenges, grand or otherwise, that an institution can tackle well at any given point. Despite these various complexities, universities continue to experiment with models for supporting multidisciplinary activity. There's no doubt that doing so will become more important in the future, not only in the field of health. One enormous benefit that UCL has over so many other institutions in this space is that we have a deep culture of interdisciplinary respect and a willingness to reach out beyond disciplinary and professional silos to find collaborators across the institution. That's really the secret sauce as we think through all these issues in facilitating multidisciplinary work. With our strong cultural bias towards multidisciplinarity, I'm fairly convinced that we can make almost any structure work, though some more easily than others. Having considered briefly the things on which we need to focus to deliver impactful multidisciplinary work, it's worth turning to consider the issues that almost inevitably rise in bringing the intellectual resources of a university into engagement with the work of any health system. In talking about the challenges at this point, I should stress that it's my impression that relationships between UCL and our partner trusts are about as strong as any that I've ever seen in the sector, that there's genuinely goodwill and respect on both sides, and an understanding across the university and the health system of the value add that each brings. Like our deep culture of multidisciplinarity, that cannot be taken for granted. I've known universities far more concerned with outputs in high-ranked journals than the health of local populations, and health systems so obsessed with waiting times that they have very little interest in teaching and research. Those things are true neither of UCL nor of its partners. Nevertheless, bringing together the work of an entire university and the work of the health system is a coordination problem of no small proportions. The difficulty of the task is exacerbated by the characteristic of both health practitioners and academics, that they value their appropriate professional autonomy. And so real cooperation requires buy-in at many levels of both a university and a health system partner. There are essentially two challenges. We need to make sure that we have the right players engaged in the relationship, that interaction is at the right level in the health system, and that we are working on problems that will really make a difference. As for the players engaged in the relationship, I think it's crucial on the university side that there be some coordination from someone with a whole of institution view and a whole of institution accountability. At one level, that's why I, as Provost, must always take an active interest in the relationship with the health system. At UCL, however, our relationship with the health system is primarily overseen by our Vice Provost Health. And we have this year expanded the scope of that role to include a reporting relationship as regards health system engagement with the deans of all the faculties. It's crucial that key players in the health system know to whom they can turn to broker a relationship with our data science or scientists or management academics, just as much as with our physicians and biomedical scientists. Indeed, in some sense, the whole of institution contact is most necessary as regards disciplines outside the traditional health disciplines. None of that's to deny the crucial importance of maintaining a strong fabric of relationship and initiative at every level of the university and the health system. But there does need to be a coordination point as at the institutional level. As for engaging with the right level in the health system, this is an issue about which universities need to be much more strategic than perhaps we have been. There are ideas to be seeded, conversations to be had, and projects to be undertaken with at least individual trusts, consortia such as UCLP and the North Central London Provider Alliance, private providers, the Department of Health and Social Care, and interested politicians from all the major political parties. Of these, perhaps the most challenging is the identification of projects that can usefully be undertaken with the consortia. Increasing the number of institutional players increases both impact and coordination costs in more or less equal measure. The success of projects at this level becomes therefore much more dependent upon the ability of their leadership to build a consensus for change and to drive it through implementation. When you ask such consortia to identify moments in their history in which they've been most impactful, they almost always point to the work of a particularly strong, engaging, and sometimes charismatic leader. Their inherent advantages, that is, scale of academic resources and population, are insufficient to guarantee success alone. Finally, and perhaps most surprisingly, the most difficult part of effective engagement with the health system outside our traditional areas of collaboration in clinical and biomedical teaching and research is finding projects that will make a meaningful difference to the work of, for example, a particular trust or group of trusts. On the provider side, it can be difficult to understand what might be possible with a broader set of intellectual resources. On the university side, it can be difficult to identify the problems that most urgently need solution, or the solution of which will be most impactful. A certain amount of matchmaking is inevitable, and I've seen university provider collaborative initiatives take more than a year to identify those things outside the remit of the traditional health disciplines on which they might most usefully work together, whether in training or research. It's important to start with a few really showcase projects, to get them right, even if identifying them takes some time, and to build trust in the capacity of a broader group of people in both the university and the health provider to work together. Given all the potential pitfalls then, the work of bringing together the whole of the university and its local and national health systems is not for the faint-hearted. But UCL and its partners have seen some real success in this field. Just like last week, for example, I was visiting the new Chase Farm Hospital and hearing about the work of the Bartlett Faculty of the Built Environment in helping hospital designers think about patient and staff flows within that extraordinary facility. Closer to the work of the Institute of Neurology is the cooperation of the Faculty of Engineering in Queen Square Hospital in the development of EpiNav, that's already been mentioned in the treatment of epilepsy. And there are other examples aplenty. Most importantly, the prize to be gained by bringing the intellectual resources of the whole university to preserving good health, to tackling disease, and to improving the effectiveness of the health system is simply phenomenal. It's more than worth the effort, given the size of the challenge that's facing us in affordably managing the needs of an aging and diverse population, the health outcomes of which are currently unacceptably unequal. Who knows? If we really get our acts together in this space, by the time that my nominal aphasia does tip into full-blown dementia, and my body is falling apart in all the other ways that undoubtedly await, we'll have found new therapeutics, but also better ways of helping me to live a quality life and to engage with a health system that responds to my needs flexibly, equitably, and affordably. For that goal, there must be incentive for me and for all of UCL to strive. The commitment it's been my intention this evening to underscore must be a commitment for the whole of our university, and which will only strengthen the work of our colleagues in units such as the Institute of Neurology. The Institute is stronger being in a university such as UCL, and the health system will be stronger if the Institute and the broader university are together committed to bringing our resources to the problems that we face. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Michael. That was really thought-provoking. So I'd like to now ask the Institute Manager, Dr. Helene Crutzen, to give the vote of thanks.
Thanks, Mike. And thank you for another excellent presentation and summary. And thank you, Provost, for a thought-provoking and insightful address. And I hope that as your first year in office at UCL comes to a close, you share our passion for everything that is brain-related and the neurosciences. And we look forward to helping shape UCL's vision and strategy for the future. I feel honored to have been asked to give the vote of thanks to our annual address this year. Honored and equally slightly intimidated to be following such good orators. The address is not only an annual reflection of the past academic year, but it also represents a unique moment for the Institute as a whole to take a step back, pause, and reflect on our individual and collective achievements, our colleagues past and present, and for all of us to get together and in non-COVID times, share a laugh over a drink or two. And it is within that spirit that I wish to reflect on my past 6 years at the Institute. I think, and I hope you will all agree, that we have achieved a tremendous amount in 6 years. And we have grown significantly, but don't worry, I won't bore you with any stats tonight. We shifted our culture and mindset to become an even more open, transparent, and inclusive place of work. We have built greater cohesion and consistency in our operational approaches and delivery. We behave as one team rather than a collection of individual groupings, the sum being greater than the parts. We continue on our journey, constantly striving to better ourselves. It hasn't been without challenges, as we have attempted to integrate our support structures with those centrally available at UCL, and it's not always worked as seamlessly as we had hoped. And as someone recently told me, it is an evolution, not a revolution. It takes time, it takes perseverance, and it is complex. We've had many challenges, and the most obvious ones are a worldwide pandemic and Brexit. And as someone who is a firm European and with families scattered all around the world, I have felt those challenges both personally and professionally. And it is with that backdrop that I really wanted to take this opportunity tonight to thank and give a big shout out to our professional services. All of you, ION technicians, lab managers, research coordinators, project managers, administrators, you are key enabling workforce that underpins, along with our strong financial position, everything that we strive to achieve, and I'm incredibly proud of you all. You have been remarkable over the past 2 years at adapting to new ways of working and new corporate systems, which have been incredibly challenging. And the Institute is lucky to have you. You're incredibly dedicated and loyal, as is illustrated by our low staff turnover. And our very own HR manager is retiring at the end of the year after more than 30 years in office. And Libby, we will greatly miss you, and we wish you all the best. What transpired and really resonated with me at our recent strategic PI away day is that to capitalize on us all working as one team, it is important that the needs, the priorities, and the processes, as well as the rationale underpinning those, are clearly communicated and understood, be it between our local professional services teams and the central UCL support services, or between our researchers and students and our local support teams. And this has been the focus of our last 3 ION professional services away days, which included our business partners in the faculty and UCL central services. It is something that I strongly believe in and will continue to build on in the next few years. And we will invite our academic colleagues to come along. Therefore, turning to the future, the journey continues. And along the way, many opportunities lie ahead of us. A new UCL strategy, and of course, a new building and dual hub for the Institute. And alongside it, a new operational model and ways of working with improved systems to help us become even more streamlined and efficient, to facilitate the task at hand for our researchers, academics, and students alike. And importantly, to better support the implementation of our strategic plan and deliver on our mission for the benefit of society at large. The road is likely to be a long and winding one, and occasionally bumpy. But as this period represents a new chapter, with the start of a new term for Mike as our director, along with the new grouping of deputy directors, I know that by all of us working together, we can achieve anything. So in conclusion, I would like you all tonight to toast to the future, exciting times ahead, and renewed beginnings. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Sandra, Navida, Derek, and the rest of the team for organizing yet another seamless annual address. But importantly, all of you, 167 attendees, for listening tonight. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you a very good evening.
Great, thank you very much, Helene. And we were very pleased that a professional services colleague has given the vote of thanks, and I want to thank the Provost for a really thought-provoking and interesting presentation, and we really appreciate you doing the annual address this year. It was a great privilege for us to hear you. I'm afraid that we can't take you all out for a drink now like we normally do, so I just want to thank you all for attending. It's a brilliant number of people attending. That's the end of the proceedings this evening, so please have a nice evening, and thank you very much for attending the annual address, and thank you, Provost. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye.